All right. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. Wait for everybody to jump on for a second. We'll get started. All right. So invite Stormy. Stormy. All right. Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
You can't or can?
I can. We're good.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So, for everybody joining us tonight, what we usually do on Tuesdays, this is number 6 of our Tuesday night healings. We usually get together and we talk about different subjects. This was going to be one of our big subjects. This subject for the week is narcissism, or also known as NPD, also known as narcissistic personality disorder, and all the things that go along with that. Now, this is something near and dear to me because I was in a relationship with a narcissist. So it was something that I studied on for a very long time. And a lot of the things that go along with it are also things that go on in a normal unhealthy relationship. So it's not always just because the person is narcissistic. They do these things. Everybody, to an extent, has different things that they do that goes along with this. So we're going to dive right into it. So NPD, or narcissistic personality disorder, is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. They need to seek too much attention. They want people to admire them. People with this disorder may lack the ability or care of feelings for others. Now, most people, when you hear that, you're just like, oh, well, my boss is a narcissist, or like this person's a narcissist because they're just so like egotistical. They think so highly of themselves. It actually is a lot more than that. With that being said, there's 3 main phases that go along with it. And in these 3 stages, or phases, however you prefer to consider them, you got the idealize, the devalue, and the discard. Now, we're going to break down each one of those things, certain examples, personal experiences, stuff like that. I'll give my take on it. Stormy will jump in. She'll give her take on it, and then we'll keep moving through. Now, I took a lot of notes, so I'm going to be reading off of the paper from the notes I wrote down and stuff because I didn't want to forget anything. So the first thing we're going to jump into is the idolize phase, also known as the love bombing phase. A love bombing is a tactic in which someone bombs you, with extreme displays of attention and affection, with the intent to manipulate you. Now, although you're being showered with love can seem like such a positive thing at the beginning of like a romantic relationship, the love bombing actually leads to gaslighting and abuse. So some examples of what that might be is someone would sit there and say, I always dreamt of someone as perfect as you. You're like the best thing that ever happened to me. I knew right away we were like soulmates. I can't believe you're still single. You're so amazing. I can never see myself leaving you. No one has ever treated me this way or made me feel this way. Those are just some examples. Now, basically to describe the love bombing phase of it, when you get into a relationship with somebody, they're going to hit you with all of that stuff. Some examples from mine from a past relationship would be, I was told that I was the one that got away, that they waited so long for me to come back into their life, that they fell in love with me immediately because we were meant to be. They knew they wanted to spend the rest of their life with me. They wanted to get married. And it happened very quickly. Now, as someone with borderline and stuff like that who, dives into things a lot quicker than I probably should, you feel like that person is like reciprocating that. So you also sit there and you feel like, wow, like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Like, wow, I feel so good about it. This is amazing. Like, I finally found the person that feels the same way as me, and they're feeling it quickly. Wow, like this is exactly what I was waiting for. It's not, though. It's a manipulation tactic. And what goes along with that too is, in order for that person to be able to really lock you in and make you feel like that you're that love person, they basically turn into what's called like a relationship chameleon. Some people call it a dating chameleon. I prefer a relationship chameleon. It's the same thing. And basically the definition of that is like a relationship chameleon is someone who fears standing out. They blend in to find approval and love. In short, you're going to share parts of yourself, like you may share parts of yourself, but have a deep fear that if you allow yourself to be yourself, they won't accept and love you. So you pretend to be something you're not. Good example. So in my relationship and stuff, like I was into video games and I was into watching football, or, I was interested in drinking at that time and stuff like that. That person basically adopted my persona and then started doing the exact same things, the same things I was interested in. And then watching that person go into different relationships, watching them change the things I thought that they were into. Now all of a sudden they're into this. Now they're into this. And it's more than just like growing and stuff like that and trying to be a part of something that your significant other cares about. A lot of it boils into you go way over the top just to blend in. And it's because you don't have a sense of self. And if you think that you don't have your own set of hobbies, you're just adopting the person you're dating's hobbies. And you really don't have a sense of self. And what winds up happening with these sorts of people is that once they realize that they don't have that sense of self and that the things that they're pretending to like, they actually don't like, that's when they start to implode. That's when it becomes a problem. So basically with that being said, that in a nutshell is the idolizing thing. You're going to be made out to feel like you are the greatest thing in the world, that you sat there and you've just been mistreated in the past, and I finally found you. Like, I'm with you. Everything's going to be good now. Like, you can do no wrong. The love is going around, the emotions, the passion, the everything. It's just flying around. And you just become like addicted to it in that moment because you're not realizing what's actually happening to you. So, Stormy, I'll let you jump in if you want to talk about the idealizing stage of this.
I guess with my first, my only ex-husband, we dated for 17 years. I started dating him when I was 16 years old, and he was like 7 years older than me. So he did a lot of the idolization to me because I was young, dumb, that's what I akin it to. But he did all of that, and just it gets to a point where then that falls away for sure, and you're not idolized by them anymore. So it's kind of rough to deal with. That part I think really happened in the beginning of the relationship, and then as things progressed, the other symptoms we're going to talk about came into play.
Absolutely. And it's a very intoxicating part of the relationship. You don't want it to end. You really don't. Like, you just feel so complete inside, so cared for, so loved. Like, it's just something that you just don't want to stop. However, that leads us to the second part, and that's where things start to get messy. So in the second part, you're talking about the devalue stage. And basically, in a nutshell, it's victims of abuse are often unaware that this stage has even begun. Their intuition may have started moving them or inclining or suggesting to them that something has changed, but it's often hard to put an exact finger on what has changed. Narcissists concurrently play a public and private game, which makes it harder to understand. If you express concern, suddenly you are the jealous one, and they will make you doubt yourself. He or she becomes cold and uncaring almost overnight. This is when the mask falls. When you see the real person for who they truly are. Excuses are made, and if we don't accept them, you become the one that's actually crazy and imagining all this stuff. And they're managing down your expectations from constant contact to crickets. This verbal abuse is the one that hurts the absolute most. You go from being like completely loved and stuff like that to just devalued immediately, usually without any recourse whatsoever. It's something just innocuous as like, maybe they saw a different light of you, and maybe they're like, well, maybe that person's not so perfect, and then they just start beating on you. So some examples would be that they could say is, the more I get to know you is the more I don't like you. My exes were much better or nicer than you or prettier than you, smarter than you, more responsible than you. The list goes on. You were never good enough for me. I can't believe you fooled me into believing you were someone else. I could see why everyone leaves you. You never listen to anyone. You always need to be right. And then another thing would be like, you're an emotional mess and I can't keep picking up your pieces. Well, that's where like the real like narcissistic abuse starts to come in. So they bring you up and then now you're starting to go down. And inevitably, everything that goes up must come down, but this comes down in a very extreme way, a very crashing way, which leads us into one of the most disturbing things that I've ever come across, which is gaslighting. I didn't know what the term was when I first heard that. It was like gaslighting. Like, are you lighting gas? Like, what? I don't get it. Then I had a psychologist explain it to me. And the reason being is because I was going to see a psychologist to talk about the relationship that I was in and stuff like that, to try to get some understanding as to why these things were happening. And with that being said, they explained to me, they're like, this sounds like typical gaslighting. Okay, so gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which the abuser attempts to sow self-doubt and confusion in their victim's mind. Typically, gaslighters are seeking to gain power and control over the other person by distorting their reality and forcing them to question their own judgment and intuition. I mean, some examples of that, if the definition didn't give it away, is, they're saying, you're the one that's being crazy, you're the one overreacting, I was just joking, you're the one that made me do this. If you loved me, you would do what I want you to do. I'm only telling you this because I love you, and this is all your fault. So some examples that I would give from my own personal background to deal with that is, once I got through the love bombing stage, it had been, a while. The love bombing stage lasted for several months. And then when it got into the next stage of it, that's when all the excuses started coming out. That's when the cheating started happening. That's when the lying started happening. That's when the manipulation started happening. And I had no idea what I was involved in, which we'll get into later, what I had to figure out to try to get around to that. But, some of the examples I was being told were that I was the one that was crazy. Everything that I was imagining is because I'm emotionally unstable, that I'm mentally ill, that it's all in your head. How come you don't have enough confidence in yourself to think that these things aren't happening? Being told that they don't find me attractive anymore. That I don't help with anything. I'm too needy. I'm too emotionally attached or whatever. Sitting there saying you never cared about me. You only think of yourself. These were constant things that were coming up all the time. And, you're trying, especially if you're in love with the person, you're trying your best to, be there, understand, what are you going through? Why is this happening? Why are we doing this? What did I do wrong? What can I do better? And you're just chasing it. You're like, well, what happened to that love bombing that was just going on? Where I was the greatest thing? Why all of a sudden is this crap happening? Why am I being cheated on? Why am I being lied to? What is going on? And you don't know. And you can't figure it out until, obviously you get educated on it and stuff like that and realize that it's a lot more at play than anything that you're personally doing. I mean, you could be doing, it's not to say I was a perfect boyfriend, because I wasn't whatsoever. But, even the ones that could be close to perfect, you're still going to go through this if you're dating a narcissist. I mean, gaslighting is literally one of the worst possible things to experience. It is. Because you may be thinking you're doing the right thing, and you talk to your people. You sit there, you talk to your inner circle, and you're just like, listen, this is what's going on, okay? I'm in love with this person. I want to be with this person, but I don't know, what am I doing wrong? And then they'll talk to you, and they'll be like, no, you're not doing anything wrong. But then the narcissist gets a hold of them. They start talking to them. Then they turn on you, because the way they spin it and make it change is well, you don't know. He's crazy. He's not emotionally right. He's just not there. You can't listen to what he's saying. And they get in their head and they manipulate them. And I noticed that in the workplace, especially because this person that I dated also worked in the same organization. And, people from other offices and stuff like that are telling me oh no, that person can never do that. There's no way. That's not possible. I know them. No, you may know them at work, but you don't know them at home. You have no idea what's going on. None at all. And that's why, it's a tough thing. And you don't realize it at the time when it's happening to you, gaslighting, but when you like realize the definition and stuff like that, it plays into more situations than just like a relationship. It plays into friendships as well. It plays into a lot of different things. When you're specifically telling someone something and you know exactly what's being sent back to you, like you're dealing with that person one-on-one, but then everybody else in the audience is being told a completely different story. That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's not just lying, but that other person is sitting there and saying like, no, this is not what's going on. He's just crazy. He's making it up. Like, and when people find out that you have like a mental illness, they immediately run with it and they sit there and they're like, well, yeah, he's mentally ill. That's why he's obviously making all that stuff up. No, that's not always the case. It's not, especially if you have a good handle on your mental illness. When you can sit down and rationalize rather than going from, episode to episode to episode, you're sitting there and rationalizing like, no, this is what's actually going on, which is why throughout this process, my writing kind of helped me a lot because I would always take notes. Even to this day, I always do. I don't want to call it evidence, but like basically to back up when I feel like I'm being gaslighted. So that way, should other entities get involved, like in my relationship court or friends or whatever the case may be like, no, this is the concrete evidence. This is what's actually happening. Don't listen to what she's saying because this is exactly what she's doing. It's right here. This is black and white. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're going to be able to convince people and say like, oh yeah, like, wow, maybe that is what's going on. Maybe that person isn't well themselves. It really depends. But if you get caught up in that manipulation, that gaslighting, it's hard to break free because you just want that person to forgive you. You want them to love you. You want them to be there for you. And at that point in time, you know what I mean? They're basically starting their exit strategy. Because you got to imagine from a narcissist, it's not that they just want to be treated with like good emotion. They want any type of emotion. And think about the news. What elicits more of a response? Hearing good news or hearing something tragic? Obviously something tragic. So if they're, let's just say, actively cheating on you and you're starting to put the pieces together and figure it out, and they can convince you that it's not happening, which I was experienced a few times, even though it was blatant, then at that point, they're like, got away with it. Still keep them on the hook, still keep doing what I'm on the side, and the narcissism is just pouring in. All that narcissistic supply, filling me up right here. Good emotions, bad emotions, all of it. Getting it all. And they get that supply, which floats their ego, which makes them feel like they're better than everybody. Like that's where that comes in. So Stormy, do you want to jump in and talk about that, the devaluing stage?
Yes. I would say like 4 years into the relationship is when that started. And of course started with you're getting fat, you're not attractive anymore, you don't cook like my mother cooks like, you don't clean like my mother cleaned like, things like that. Or your family is just getting involved in our life and your friends are getting involved in our life, so basically he's pushing my family away, I'm pushing my family away to keep him, pushing my friends away. It was horrible. Like, it was just so many years of dealing with that eventually I left. Like, we broke up, we weren't married yet, I left a couple of years, but then I went back. So that's a whole part of that narcissist behavior is I actually went back to that person and I actually married them and stayed with them another 10 years. And finally, I left. I got tired of the cycle.
Yep. And it's a vicious cycle. And that actually does happen a lot. I mean, if you read about it or if you've experienced it yourself, it does happen a lot because that abuse lingers with you. And it makes you feel like all you keep chasing. It's almost like when people say they do heroin. It's that first high, like they're constantly for the rest of their career of doing it, chasing the dragon. Like it's basically just like that. You get made so high on a pedestal, and especially if you're not used to something like that, it's so intoxicating that you're always going to be chasing that high. But that's what they want you to do. They want you to keep chasing that high because they keep getting narcissistic supply. So then the reality of the situation is they're the one that's actually getting high while you're just miserable, trying to just keep chasing it and fighting it. And you're never going to get it. You're never going to get back to that phase. Because if you're already on this point where you're being gaslighted, there's no turning back. You're going right into the discard phase. Literally. Like, you're just moments away from it. And you don't even realize it. And, you know, when you're constantly being lied to and told that you're crazy, and, you know, the things that you know to be real, you know what I mean, are basically put to blame that you're mentally ill, or that, oh, you must have been drunk or something like that. There's just a million excuses in the arsenal. You start to believe it because they're so convincing. And they're convincing the people in their circle that you're the one with the problem. So you really start to like take a personal inventory and be like, whoa, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. What am I doing? What can I do better? Then you jump into the discard phase. And in the discard phase, you know, basically, to give a basic definition, you know, many victims often say that the discard came out of the blue. Everything was just fine, and then they get a phone call, a text, a Facebook message, dismissing them in a cold and hurtful way. Now, in the devalue stage, the narcissist went from hot, then cold, then seemingly in a blink of an eye. In this phase, the victim is labeled as the crazy one, or the psycho, and that sends their head spinning at these false accusations, like I was just explaining. It's important to know that the narcissist will target your strengths and call them your weaknesses. This is called a smear campaign, and the goal is just to simply ruin you. You know, they make you curl up into a little ball. You know, they make it so you're not able to educate yourself that this had anything to do with them and it's all your fault. You know, many of the victims are thrown into CPTSD and suffer greatly, and they try to pick up the pieces and repair their shattered lives, but it's usually not successful unless you find coping mechanisms or go through some sort of therapy or whatever the case may be. Because the narcissistic abuse, you know, it lingers for a while if you're with or around a professional narcissist. Obviously, you know, you're going to come around people who have narcissistic traits, but if you are with an accomplished narcissist, especially in a relationship, it's going to take a little while to get over that type of abuse. Some examples of the discard phase would be the narcissist saying, I never cheated on you, you're the one that cheated, and I'm not going to wait around anymore to be accused of this anymore. Or, I'm honest and everybody knows it, no one's ever going to believe your lies because you're just a pathological liar. Another one, I was never like this before you came into my life. I hate drama and all you do is thrive on it. And you're crazy and you need help. When I was reading like examples and stuff like that to come up with and put like in this talk and stuff like that, it was like I was almost reliving that entire thing because word for word, that's what I was hearing. And I just could not believe it. Like some examples from that would be my ex. I talked about it in one of my other videos. It was just like she used to be able to just like hit every point of the heart and like destroy you in just one single shot. So like she would call me like a fat alcoholic piece of shit who should go kill himself. Like, boom. Constantly bringing up the fact no one's ever going to love you. Never going to happen. You're just another one, my favorite one. You're a black hole of misery that sucks the life out of everything. Or you're like a child that needs to constantly be reassured and coddled all the time. Or you were the one that made me do this and made me this way, and I never, ever loved you. For somebody that you're wanting to spend the rest of your life with and stuff like that, like to hear those things, again, after you went from literally, like mine happened within like the course of a year, but, you know, to hear you're such a pedestal, like you're way high up on there, and then you just start hearing these horrible things you've never heard in your entire life. You're like, what did I do wrong? And you start thinking back, like, I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't, like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, my own enemies don't even talk to me this way. And you're the person I love. Like, what is going on? And it makes you feel so crazy. It does. Like, I used to be able to think about the whole situation. The way I would describe it when I talked to people after I had gotten out of it and stuff like that, it was like, it almost felt like that person had like the cover of The Godfather, like the hand on the marionette or like the strings and everything, just in your brain, just like weaving it to how they wanted it and making you think that what happened didn't actually happen. Even when you would catch them blatantly cheating and stuff like that, somehow or another, they would walk their way out of it and convince you it wasn't real, that it wasn't happening. And it happened so many times. I can't even begin to tell you because it's so embarrassing how many times it happened, and just kept letting it go. Because I was believed to think that I was the one that was insane and that these things weren't happening, that I was just over paranoid. Until one day I said, enough is enough. I had all the proof. I had way more proof than I needed to, but I just said, enough is enough. I'm not going to be treated like this anymore. And I left it. And even after leaving, like Stormy had said before, for months, I wanted to go back into it. I had to have like my family intervention step in and say, my dad told me, you're not going to be around this person anymore. You're not going to help them with anything. You're not going to talk to them unless it's absolutely necessary. But like, you are not doing this anymore. At the time, I was pissed at him. Like, why? It's my life. It's not your business. But then once, like my dad's famous words always were, you're going to get mad. One day you're going to get mad and you're just going to put your feet in and you're going to say, absolutely not. I am not going to be treated like this ever again. And sure as shit, it does happen. And when it did happen, it felt so nice to finally start shedding that and, going to get help and stuff like that and realizing these things. Because, if you never get diagnosed with anything or you never hear the exact definitions to things that go on in your life or basically how things are made, how you tick, once you do start hearing about it, it's just like a light bulb goes off and you're like, whoa, that explains so much. That's why I am that way. That's why that person's that way. And you start to be able to like learn about it more and understand it. And you don't develop an appreciation for it because it's terrible, but you begin to develop that you're not the only one. This happens to so many people, literally in like the same chronological types of order. So you start to sit there and think like, okay, like, so this is the stages as I'm going over tonight. This is what I can expect next. And like maybe next time you can prevent yourself from getting in that type of situation. Maybe next time you can start to see the warning signs. Maybe if somebody comes right off the gun in like the first 2 weeks and is telling you that they're the love of your life and you're the greatest thing that ever happened to them, maybe instead of you just being like, hey, wow, this is amazing, maybe you stop and say, wow, maybe this is a red flag. Do I believe in love at first sight? Sure, I'm sure it happens. But if it's a pattern, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it's not. Maybe that's not what this is. Maybe not. Stormy, did you want to jump on about the discard phase?
Yeah, like I said, he pretty much broke up with me the first time, and then, of course, it was like 2 years that we were broken up, but the whole time I'm still feeling, in love with this person, want to be back with them, and then, again, they make you feel crazy, everything was your fault, so, like, I went into, like, a really deep depression. And then, once again, they knew I wasn't dating anybody. They knew they could get their hooks back into me again. So that's what they decided to do. And I fell for it. And I would say by the end of the 17 years that I was with this person, I felt like a prisoner. I felt like the lowest of the low. Like, I had no friends anymore. Half the time my family didn't even want to come over. I couldn't go see my family. Like, it just got to a point where it was so toxic for me, but he loved it because he had that control over me and had me where he wanted him. So, yeah, anybody that's had to deal with a narcissist in a relationship, a marriage, having a child with a narcissist, it's tough. And it's even equally as tough if you have a good friend that's a narcissist, that has that narcissistic behavior. It can even make your friendships toxic and can cause a lot of problems if you have multiple friends together. I had a friend that was pretty toxic, and she caused a lot of issues between a lot of our core group of friends. But she had that narcissistic behavior towards everybody and wanted to control everybody, and the marionette strings, perfect example for sure. But yeah, so I feel for anyone that's dealt with that or is dealing with it now. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to leave because you do love that person, and it's a tough thing to stay because you're miserable, you're unhappy, so it's kind of like what do you do?
Yeah, it really is. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's crazy making is exactly what it is. And you're doomed from the start. If you don't stop it in the beginning when the love bombing and stuff like that is going off, you're ultimately going to go through the other two phases. And it's going to leave you alone, like by yourself, emotionally, physically, everything. And it's devastating. And again, it's even worse, like Stormy mentioned before, if you're in a custody situation too, because then you're forced to deal with that narcissist going forward, till who knows when. So the narcissistic abuse, does it ever stop at that point? No. When you spot it and you can learn the signs and symptoms and stuff like that, and you know that this person is acting this way because this reason, sure, you can try to mitigate it by doing other things. You know what I mean? Maybe not engaging with them so much, maybe dealing with them in a different way, not giving them that narcissistic supply. And it's a tough thing to get used to, especially if you're being challenged. If you have a child with somebody and stuff like that, you're going to be challenged on your thoughts on parenting, on, what their diet should be, whether they should receive this medical treatment, dental treatment, whatever the case may be. You're always going to have interaction with that parent if you're both involved in the child's life, and you're not going to agree. I mean, if you guys did agree, you'd probably still be together. So you already know right off of there it's a hot, sore subject. You're probably not going to agree on most things. But when you're dealing with somebody who knows exactly how to pinpoint to get you to where they need you to be, it's very difficult to navigate that. And a lot of my situations and stuff like that, when I was in this, like, you would try to go about it in a civil manner, but then it would always blow up into something else. And when it blew up into something else, you knew exactly what to say to get you going. And in the past, I used to engage it because I wasn't educated. I wasn't educated on what was going on. So I just engage it because I'm like, no, I'm putting my personal feelings and stuff inside of it. I am not going to be talked to this way. I'm not going to be treated this way. Or you're not going to do this. What does it do? Nothing. Literally nothing. It is an absolute waste of time. You can sit there and say your opinion all you want. But if they already think of you as lower than them, they didn't care about your opinion to begin with. So you are literally just wasting your breath. And what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, thinking things are going to change. And they don't. You are literally running yourself insane because you keep trying and trying to convince them this is the way it should be done, or you should feel this way about this. It's never going to change. If they already think of you as a loser, you're always going to be a loser in their eyes. You're never going to change that. You're also talking to somebody because one of the things that narcissists do is they cannot take ownership for any mistakes because in their eyes, they're perfect. So you're trying to tell somebody in one hand that they're doing something you think is wrong, and they can't even accept that it's wrong because then they would have to admit that they're at fault for anything and that they're incapable of doing so. It's always an outside reason's fault. Like we were given the examples before. I only cheated because you made me cheat. Like that's like the most bizarre thing I ever had. How does someone make you cheat? Because you were unhappy with them in the relationship, so why didn't you leave? You had to go that extra mile. It's unnecessary. There's no excuse for any of that stuff. There's no excuse for any of that type of abuse. If you were so unhappy with this person that you feel the need to say those terrible things to them or do those terrible things to them, then just leave. Nobody is forcing you to stay. It's just common courtesy. So not to go too far off, subject to what we were talking about, just you have to realize what's worth it. Is this fight worth it? If I even open my mouth, will it mean anything? Will it change anything? If you're saying no to all those answers, probably shouldn't do it. Because all you're doing is feeding them narcissistic supply. You're going to upset yourself and frustrate yourself and ruin your own day. And they're just going to gallop off like, oh, I got the last word. I got the right conversation. It's not worth it. I did want to throw in there a fun fact. This is a fun fact I pulled from the internet. I don't know how true it is, but it was something I saw that I thought was interesting. They say the top 5 zodiac signs that are often considered the most narcissistic are Leo, Aries, Gemini, Sagittarius, and Capricorn. Just a little tidbit thing to throw in there. Like I said, I don't know how true that is, but I don't know. Now, when you finally get away from it, when you're finally away from the narcissistic abuse, usually the people that have been abused tend to show signs. And some of those signs that linger on after, you're done being, in a relationship or a friendship or whatever the case may be. Some of those things are anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, loss of sense self and self-worth, the inability to forgive yourself. You become a people pleaser. You have self-destructive behaviors because you feel like you need to be punished. You have terrible trust issues, and you lose your self-worth altogether. And I can say from my own personal experience, probably almost every single one of those things I experienced. Constant anxiety, constant worrying why you weren't good enough, going to bed at night, why am I not good enough? Why are they doing this to me? Why is this still happening? Why can't I stop thinking about them? Why? The depression, right there. You're depressed that the great thing that it started out to be is coming into an inevitable nightmare. And it's only when you really step away from it and stuff like that do you realize that it was all a lie to begin with. It was all a lie. It was all predicated on a lie. You were made to believe that you were important and loved because they were manipulating you from the scratch. So those feelings, it makes you question yourself too. It's like, was I really in love with that person, or was it just the facade they were putting on? Who is that person really inside? You don't know, because you only see what they want you to see. You lose your sense of self and your self-worth. You feel like you're not worth anything because the last two stages of a narcissistic abuse is them literally emotionally beating the piss out of you. So you're just like, wow, I feel like I'm the worst person in the world, and I just went from feeling like I was the greatest person in the world. What is wrong? You have an inevitability to forgive yourself. You're constantly sitting there wondering why you did this, why you weren't good enough, like I just said before. You're constantly going to keep beating yourself up, thinking it was your fault, until you figure out that it's not. It's more than that. There's more at play than just that. Then you go into people pleasing. You start wanting to please people because you're so afraid that you're going to get abused like that again. That maybe if everybody likes me, then maybe I won't get hurt like that again. And then you just ultimately start picking up characteristics of a narcissist, like a relationship chameleon. You start losing your sense of self and becoming what you think other people want you to be, because you're so afraid that if you get judged for what you like, that type of abuse will happen again. And you don't want to go through it. It's so terrible. Then you start doing self-destructive behaviors, things like drinking or drugs or risky relationships or whatever the case may be. You start doing it to also punish yourself because you feel like you deserve it. You feel like, well, I'm such a piece of crap and no one will ever love me. I might as well just keep drinking. I might as well drown it in a bottle, whatever the case may be. Then you have obviously trust issues because you put all your eggs in this one basket because you're being told everything you want to hear. So you're like, well, I can trust this person. Just keep piling it up, and then just take the basket and boom. No. You're left with nothing. Literally nothing. Which goes into the last thing, loss of self-worth. Because you have nothing left and you were just told that you were like the worst human being on the planet. You lose your whole sense of self. You don't even know what you're worth anymore. Think no one is ever going to love you. No one's ever going to want me. No one's ever going to want any of this stuff because that's what you were told. That's what you were convinced. There's ways to combat it. They don't always work, but there are things you can do to combat that type of behavior. You could try to ignore them. It may just infuriate them and have them come at you even more. Sometimes, you know what I mean? I'm sure if you're not in a custody situation, it's just maybe just someone in your life, getting away from them, sure, that could work. In a custody situation, I don't think you can really ignore the other person because one way or another, you're going to come in proximity with them and they'll probably just be even more pissed off. You could try to offer them constructive criticism, but if they're not going to take the blame for anything they're doing wrong, so inevitably it's just going to blow up in your face and they're just going to say, well, you're the one that's whacked out. You could try to set and enforce boundaries, if you're going to start getting heated, the conversation will end, or I'll walk away, or whatever the case may be, or we're not going to talk about specific things. We're only going to talk about this if we have to talk. Another thing that I guess you could do, this list is kind of I took examples from different sites and stuff like that. So I don't know that these would all play out very well, but if you called them out in public, chances are, if you're dealing with a narcissist, that's probably also going to blow up in your face. I probably wouldn't recommend that. Or if you try to talk negatively about them, I don't see how that would work. Showing up late, I would feel like most of these things, I feel like you're just going to like rile them up. The only thing on here I can see that seem to make any sort of sense is like maybe try to stay calm when they try to rile you up. Because if you're not giving them supply, then maybe at that point, you know what I mean? Then they can't feed into it. Or if you bring up hard facts. In my history, when I've brought up hard facts and stuff, though, it never really went well because it was like, well, yeah, okay, you're showing me hard facts, but nah, it's still you. You're the one that's crazy. It's not me. Can't be me. So, I mean, I guess it's a give and take on that. I feel like the best medicine when it comes to that is just simply to get away from the person if you possibly can, or not engage them if you have to deal with them. Like Stormy mentioned before, like a custody situation, just don't engage them. Do your best. I mean, they're going to try to push every literal button that they possibly can to get you going, but if you don't engage them, you don't give them the supply, and hopefully after a while, you know what I mean, when they realize they can't get the supply from you, maybe they'll move on to another target. I mean, that's the best case scenario that you could hope for. Now, the last part that we're going to talk about that I mentioned earlier is how this plays into effect. So, unfortunately for people with BPD, borderline personality disorder, they tend to attract people with NPD. It's like a moth to a flame. And the reason why, just a brief definition, for the person with BPD, they see everything that they can't do within a narcissist. It's someone who appears confident and self-assured. They feel like they're the perfect counterbalance and in their own insecurities. So, you know, as someone who has BPD, you know, you're usually quiet, reserved, you know, you're constantly dealing with like self-image issues and stuff like that. So, you know, you don't really know who you are at certain points and stuff like that. So you're envious when you see somebody that's so assured of themselves, or at least portrayed to be. And they're so confident, they're so loud, they're so, you know, like exuberant. You know, you're sitting there like, wow, that's like everything I wish I could be. So you start like the moth to the flame, you just start getting closer and closer and closer to it. They can feel like the perfect counterbalance to their own insecurities, and this is amplified by the emotional dysregulation of BPD. When a person with NPD meets someone with BPD, they tend to use them to fulfill their need for validation, often at the expense of the BPD sufferer's boundaries and feelings. This insatiable need for attention coupled with the heightened emotions of BPD make it a volatile mix. If the person with NPD needs aren't met, they can often turn cold and distant, shunning the person with BPD and triggering their fear of abandonment. And when that fear of abandonment comes into play, you know what I mean, the person with BPD is going to constantly be going after them. It's like that one famous book for borderlines, I hate you, don't leave me. I mean, if that's not the emotions that a borderline feels, I don't know what is. Because when you're splitting or you're going through your, you know, feelings of abandonment or perceived abandonment, whether it's not happening, you're just perceiving it, that's exactly what it is. You don't want them to leave you. You don't want them to walk away from you. So the narcissist at that point, they're getting their supply. It's like, wow. So I can keep beating on them. And because they got their own issues with abandonment, they ain't never going to leave. I could go out and I could cheat on them. They ain't going nowhere. They're easily manipulated to the point where I could just twist and turn and just keep throwing it in their face. No, it's your BPD. I'm not cheating. It's your BPD. I'm not going out and doing this thing. It's your BPD. You're crazy. That's what it is. And it sucks. It really, really sucks. However, the party with BPD isn't always the victim. In certain instances, their extreme behavior can actually be the thing that pushes the NPD person with narcissism so far that they decide to move on or get their needs by someone else. If the person with BPD pursues them after this, it could play into the person with NPD's desire for attention and control. So, yes, I'm sure in any situation, even if the other person doesn't have narcissism, someone with borderline and stuff like that, such as myself, yes, you can tend to push people away because you're so insecure about your own stuff that you're constantly needing validation. And if you're not with somebody that's willing to understand that or meet those needs, you're going to keep pushing. You know what I mean? You're going to keep pushing the boundaries and wanting to sit there and be like, do you love me? Like the constant reassurance just to make sure. But that comes from some sort of emotional abuse, whether that stems from childhood or that stems from past relationships, whatever the case may be. If you were raised to be treated like you were a piece of shit, it's more than likely as you get into adulthood and get into a relationship that you're going to need validation because you were taught that this is how you are and who you are. It's a form of abuse. So, yes, in a normal situation with someone who has BPD and someone who does not, if they have that part about them in their BPD where they're constantly feel like they're going to be abandoned, yes, more than likely they're probably going to push that person away. So it's counterproductive. They're actually creating the situation that they're afraid of having. So, but the narcissist stuff like that, to sit there and take that and label it as a valid excuse to go out and cheat and do stuff like that, I just don't see that. I don't think it's right for anybody to cheat. If you're not happy with that person, just leave. There's nothing holding you on. I understand in situations where people have children and stuff like that, you don't want to break up the family, but if you don't want to break up the family, why are you cheating in the first place? So, you really have to weigh out the odds with all that stuff. You really have to think when you start to see these things popping up, is this person okay? Why is this happening? Why are they acting this way? Why do they feel this way? Why do they constantly need so much reassurance? And if you really care about the person, you're going to look into it and you're going to try to figure it out and be there for them and get help. And I thought, for example, after that relationship and stuff like that, that there was no way anyone was going to love me or want to be with me or anything like that because I wanted that validation. I was being cheated on, so I was constantly looking for that validation because I kept thinking to myself, like, well, if she's in love with literally everybody else and showing them affection, what the hell's wrong with me? So I would constantly be trying to seek it out. And I would just be called like needy or dramatic or whatever the case may be. But all I was trying to do is find some sort of rationale within myself as to why are you showing all these other guys attention, but like you're sitting at home nowhere like near me in the house. We're like strangers in the house. Just makes no sense. So, that's where that came in. But I realized that, by going forward and stuff like that, like I always commend Stormy, you get into that motive, and when the BPD starts going a little out of control and stuff, you're kind of like pushing people away. You're just like, you don't want to get hurt again. You don't want to feel this again. So when like somebody like Stormy comes along and like, it's just like, no, like, and digs your heels in, and it's just like, I'm going to learn all about it. We're going to figure it out. Like, I'm not going to let you fall by the wayside and stuff like that. Eventually the message does start to sink in. Like, wow, this person actually took the time to genuinely get to know what the hell is going on. So maybe there is hope. And that's only just from a friend's perspective, but it gives you hope too with other things, in life, that maybe there is someone out there that you could find love with, or maybe, you don't have to be treated like crap in literally every relationship you get into because you're so used to picking terrible people. Maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to that. It's possible, anything's possible. But the greatest thing that we can do, is when we get together, especially when we do these Tuesday night healings and stuff like that, is that we educate ourselves. We educate everybody. Like I always say in all my videos, I'm not a mental health professional. I just have been through certain things, and I'm just speaking from, experience mostly. But we can educate ourselves. We could be there for each other. And, maybe someone logged on tonight and saw that and was like, whoa, maybe that's what that person is doing to me. That makes sense. Oh, I'm starting to see like the pattern there. And maybe instead of them going through the entire 3 phases, maybe they're only on stage 2 right now and they can get out before stage 3 happens. Same thing when we talked about borderline. It's all different things to educate, to be there for each other and unite about it. So I don't have anything more. Stormy, is there anything you wanted to throw in about narcissism before I do our closing?
No, I think we covered everything.
Okay. So, it was a big subject that we went through tonight. It was. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to deal with. There's so many mitigating factors when it comes to who's at fault and what's the right thing or wrong thing to do in the situation, how to successfully get away from it before you're too far gone and you're regretting, you know what I mean, and going through tons and tons of different emotions or therapy or whatever the case may be to heal from it. You know what I mean? Because although you don't see it as a physical scar, it is an emotional scar, especially, again, if you have messed around or been with or friends with an accomplished narcissist. Because after each person that they go through and stuff like that, they tend to just sharpen their fingernails just a little bit sharper. So the next time they're not making those same mistakes, they're hitting harder and harder and harder. And just this cycle of abuse just keeps going. And unfortunately, the rate for someone with narcissism to go in and get help is very small, because then they have to admit there's something wrong with them. And I mean, why do people go and seek help? Because they know something's wrong. If you're not taking ownership that there's something wrong, you're not going to go get help. So sure, I'm sure there's ways, with cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy or any one of those to go in there and get some sort of help. But again, you have to admit there's a problem. If you can't admit that, then you can't get the help you need. So with that being said, we are going to be back on Thursday this week. I think I'm going to drop the time to 7:30, just a little bit, just a half hour earlier, just because I have to get up so early for work in the morning. And sometimes we tend to stretch on with this. So I just want to make sure I have enough time to do it and then also, upload it to our YouTube, because if you didn't catch the live tonight on TikTok, you could always catch all of our videos on the YouTube, which if you go on my TikTok page, it's listed there, or you could also look it up. It's the Paradise Collection. The reason why it's called that is because I am Nick Polisi, the author of Souls of Paradise, also Paradise Reborn. So you can always check out the books and stuff. And the Souls of Paradise, the book I just showed, on Thursday nights, what we do is we sit down and we don't read the chapters, because I don't want to give it away for anybody who's still reading it. I know there's actually a couple people that reached out to me and said that they are reading it. I had one person say they're on chapter 6 and the other one on chapter 7. We are actually going on Thursday to be doing chapters 11, 12, and 13. So more Easter eggs, more good things to find out, more, interesting things that you guys can see about how I came up with it and stuff. I usually like to try to give an update as I'm happening. I managed to do another 4 pages today in the 3rd book. It's slow moving, but it is going. Now, for next Tuesday, the topic that we've come up with for our healing is actually going to be doing co-parenting. Most people can relate to that, whether it be in a good way, a bad way. We could talk about the toxic things that go on with it, from people who are constantly talking to their co-parent or people who are not talking to them that much. Maybe that person is absent. Maybe they only come around once in a blue moon. We can get it from all different perspectives. So I always give the invitation, like I do at the end of my videos, for anyone that wants to talk about it, get it off your chest, share experiences, anything like that. Please feel free to reach out, and we would love to have you on here to talk about the stuff. I don't let just random people join the live just because you don't know what is going to be said or what's going on. So if it's something that's interested or that you're interested in doing, simply just DM me and we'll actually set that up. I know Stormy is about to be moving into her new house, and when that is done, she is going to be setting up to do autism. So that's going to be a very exciting thing that we're going to jump into. We are also going to be doing another live stream starting on Wednesdays. I don't know when it's going to start. I'm aiming for next week, but I don't know for sure. It just depends on my schedule. But we are going to be doing another one on Wednesdays. So with that being said, I'll let Stormy say goodbye before we close this out.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining and listening to me rant for a while. Going forward too, if anybody watching has any questions and stuff, you can certainly put them here in the chat, or you can send them to me privately. It usually seems to be after our chats, usually about one person, maybe 2, reaches out to me and asks about it. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that we are building an audience that people are actually like seeing that and, saying something about it. So, but thank you guys again for being here, and I will see you Thursday at 7:30 for our book review. Have a good night.